Christmas is just a couple of weeks away, but the usual enthusiasm and fanfare that comes with preparations towards the occasion seems quite absent. Concerns have been raised about the current state of the economy. I mean, the depreciation of the cedi is one hell of a topic. With the introduction of a new 100 and 200 cedi notes, people have actually joked about it, saying if you lost one, that's like hell. What is the cause of the depreciation of the cedi and the effect that it's had on the ordinary Ghanaian, as well as the economy, as we look into the Christmas celebrations? Our former Deputy Finance Minister and Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South, Kweku Hagen, here in the studio to help us understand from his perspective what can be done differently as far as stabilizing the cedi and improving the economy, lives of ordinary Ghanaians is concerned. You can join the conversation. You know what to do. Send us a message onto our WhatsApp platform, and then we'll share it with the rest of the world. Mr. Hagen, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Where have you been?
I've been around.
Doing what?
Doing opposition work.
Doing opposition work. Okay. So hopefully this will be purely Ghana work than opposition work as we look at what exactly is happening.
Opposition work is Ghana work.
Well, it's more like party work.
Constructive criticism.
Is it? Okay, I hear you. But let's look at the depreciation of the cedi for a start. Generally, people have been quiet. I mean, I've not heard as much complaints as we heard when the cedi was hitting 4 cedis. At the moment, we're getting towards 6 cedis. People seem to be feeling it. People are not necessarily talking about it. I'm not hearing people talk about it. But what's your take on the performance of the cedi so far?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your viewers, and thanks for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I think the story with the cedi has always been the same, and that's probably the reason why people have more or less given up. And then also businessmen have already factored that in, in their business. So a lot of it is actually anticipated that the cedi will definitely depreciate further against the dollar, because the fundamentals of why the cedi is depreciating still not been addressed.
And so you think that people have not really talked about it because they sort of saw it coming?
I think we have been making that predictions. I mean, many economists and many people are making that prediction that the cedi is actually heading for a disaster. And I think that's where we are going. I mean, it's almost 6 cedis now. I think a couple of months ago, when we were saying that it will get to 6 cedis by the end of the year, the government was saying that no, they have enough reserves in the Bank of Ghana to be able to basically counter that. But you see, the problem with the cedi is not about how much dollars you can throw at it, because the intervention that is usually done by the Bank of Ghana is to look at the shortage of dollars, which obviously creates demand for the dollar and depreciates the cedi. Is to throw more dollars into the system. But if you are putting, and that is a bad strategy, because supposing you want to fill a bucket of water, I mean, you know that logically when you put it under the tap and turn on the tap, the bucket will be full. But if the bucket is leaking and you put it under the, under the tap, the bucket probably never get full. And you'll be wondering why you are putting more water, but you are not resolving the problem. That's exactly what's happening with the cedi and the dollar. And I think the government has not been able to address the fundamental reasons why the cedi is actually, I think few months ago, I came up with some of the reasons why this is happening and why we should address it, to do with the monies that are being mopped up by various groups of people out of this country. I mean, dollars. People who trade in cedis here, but actually have to pay people elsewhere in dollars, and therefore mop up the cedi in the system. So there's a demand on the dollar, and that means that lots of cedis get flooded in the system and depreciate the cedi. And that has not been addressed. It's not about how much cocoa syndication money comes in. It's not about how much the reserves we have built. Those are short-term intervention. But in the long run, if you don't address the fiscal problem or the main structural problem to do with importing more and exporting, less and all that issues, you're never going to get anywhere with it. And it's sad for me to say that by 2020 we will probably be heading towards 8 to 9, cedis to the dollar, we don't address the
if
problem.
we don't address the problem. I've heard how you put it, but help educate me and my viewers a bit more on the correlation between the performance of the city and the economy at large. First of all, tell us your assessment of the economy as it is now and how the performance of the city actually aggravates the situation as far as the economy is concerned.
Okay. If you permit me, I will link that to the introduction of the money of the new city, which actually plays a role in.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Basically, if you are a country, we are still predominantly a commodity-based, economy, or agriculture-based economy. We are a country that exports very little and imports a lot.
A lot.
So you are always going to need the dollar, which is the main currency, to do this. So there should be a lot of dollar in the system for you to be able to do that. If there is that demand on the dollar, then obviously you're going to have, dollar appreciating against the cedi, and that's the cedi depreciating. So that's number one. We need to address that. Secondly, it is to do with the fiscal situation, in terms of our deficit and all that. Because if the economy is not actually improving the way it should, it has impact on your currency. And then inflation. That is the interesting one. And that's where, when you're obviously experiencing a high inflation in your economy, the impact on your local currency is to depreciate it. Okay. Now, this government is telling us that inflation is going down. Now, generally,
I mean, inflation has generally, if not gone down, stabilized at least over a stable period.
It has stabilized, and they have been boasting of a single digit. Now, the question is, if you look at the prices in the market, does it actually suggest to you that inflation is as low as they are predicting? Maybe yes, maybe no. But
are you doubting the inflation figures that the government is putting out?
That is what the reason I'm doubting the inflation figures is because of this new currency that they printed. Generally, high denomination or high value denomination currency is a sign of a perceived inflation or an inflationary economy. If you go to countries like Zimbabwe, for instance, where there is a high inflation called a hyperinflation, those are the countries where higher value denomination money is printed. Now, if you come to Ghana and you tell me that inflation is actually going down and you are getting single digit, why is it then that you are printing a higher denomination of 100 and 200 Ghana cedi in an economy like Ghana?
The Bank of Ghana, before you get to number two, the Bank of Ghana has explained that this was part of a previous work they did. They just did not roll this out.
Well, what's the previous work? Because this is a response to, either what is happening in the economy now or it's not. Is it something that they did 10 years ago or 5 years ago and now realize that they should implement it? Is the conditions at that time the same as the conditions you have today? As I was telling you, number one thing for bringing in high denomination or high value currency into your system is if your system is inflationary, if the economy is overheating. If you don't have that situation, because what does bringing a new currency does, as Bank of Ghana itself says that it brings what's it called, customer comfort and convenience.
Because they've said that people have complained about the volumes of cash.
But that doesn't exist.
To be carried.
It doesn't exist at the lower level. I mean, once derogatory mark they made as well is that money is not actually for market women, but it's for people at the high end. Now, let's break it into two. If you go to the low end now, low end people are not going to need this money, in a sense that low end people don't earn enough money anyway to be able to attract. I mean, imagine that the
low end people don't have to earn so much.
Yeah, but then how do you acquire that money? If your salary, the minimum wage is about 12 Ghana cedis now. So the lowest earner in this country gets about 240 to 300 Ghana cedis a month. So you could end up collecting a salary if you're a lower end with two notes, 100 and 200, note bill. So your salary will just be two notes. That is demoralizing, even though the value is the same. Now, because of introduction of mobile phone applications and other things, even the people at the lower end don't do a lot with cash anymore, because you can basically move money between yourself and your friend and your family just on the mobile phone. We want to go to a point where if we can figure out a way, you can probably even buy a KK using mobile application, if only you can find out how it will be delivered. So they are not actually going to be earning enough to be able to use that money anyway. And then even if they do, it will be a nightmare for them. Now come to the high net worth individual. Could be you, those who earn a lot of money. You do most of your transactions through the banking system. Nobody is going to buy an expensive house, say $500,000, which will be about 3 billion,
and go with
Ghana
cash.
cedis, and carry sacks of Ghana must go.
Oh, you can pay some, through the bank. You pay the rest in cash.
You do.
Either way, you still need some high. You still need some high denominations.
You are not going to do that. And then the number 3, which is even interesting, we are moving into a digital, cashless society, as the government wants us to believe. If you look at the Bank of Ghana's own data, the cash in the system, that is the bank cash in circulation outside the banking system, is about 12 billion, which is now about 34% of what they call money supply. Which means that in the last decade, money in circulation has actually reduced, because we have moved from the last 10 years 43% to 34%. So we are making progress on the cashless thing because of these applications and all that. Now, how can you introduce a cashless society and at the same time be printing higher value money? It defeats the whole purpose, because the idea of cashless society is to discourage people from using money. So if you are going to make it convenient to carry money, because if I have a house full of cash, it's probably because of people stealing it and all that. You think it would be better to put it in the bank. If you can reduce that money you have in your house, to about 1/4 of its size, you will probably want to keep it. This government has collapsed banks, and the system is illiquid. They are compounding that illiquid situation by introducing high denominations, which means that basically people will not be taking their money to the bank. If you can conveniently keep your money, why would you put it in the bank? Therefore, the banks will be starving of depositors' money, which means less loan will be in the system, which means people will not be able to borrow the things they need to do, which means you have a bad Christmas.
So we're getting to the Christmas conversation. So so you're saying essentially, what you're saying essentially is that the economy is just the state of the economy, which in your perception perspective is bad, is just being aggravated by policy and the decisions that the government is taking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the most dangerous bit is the introduction of criminals into the system.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that counterfeiting, people who print money, and there are counterfeit money in this country, somebody is printing them, will have a field day. If I can use this paper, this one sheet of paper, to print a criminal 50 Ghana cedi bill. Now this paper can print me 200. Why should I print 50? Okay. I'll be printing 200, so I'll be making 4 times the money. That money coming into the system will then create inflation, because that money will overheat the system. The more money people can print into the system. Secondly, it increases terrorist activities.
How?
Basically, terrorists move money around to be able to carry out terrorist activities. If they have economies or countries where currencies are huge and they can easily be moved, they will be more attractive to that, because they don't want to be doing Ghana must go.
That's a long shot. That's a long shot.
I can actually show you some. I was just reading an article. This article here. The reason why the 500 euro has been withdrawn is because of terrorism. And I can read a portion. That's a small portion for you to see what this money can do. Apart from counterfeiting, we are talking about tax evasion. We are talking about bribes. We are talking about terrorism, and just a small portion. And I can show you cash use in terrorism finance is likely one of the main reasons that policymakers have cracked down on large bills.
They say it's likely, so we don't know that for sure.
There is actually a report.
This is someone's analysis.
No, it's not analysis. It's a report.
Okay.
And there is the rest of the report is actually there, which you can actually have a look at.
Okay.
This comes from Europol. Europol is like Interpol. And the investigations that they have done actually shows that. Listen to this bit. The Eurozone 500 notes are so valuable to the criminal underworld that they have exchanged hands above face value.
I see. That's pretty interesting, an interesting revelation. Let's come back to Ghana and how people can survive within this, festivities. I first want to find out what you would have done differently if you were at the helm of affairs. Like you said, you're doing opposition work. So what would you have done, the helm of affairs, assuming you were finance minister at this time, and you're looking to make Christmas easier for every Ghanaian in a tight economy? What would you do?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have collapsed 9 banks.
Let's assume you already have. No, or let's assume you've won elections today.
Because that is what has brought us here. If we win elections today, I will suggest to, or I will recommend to my government that we should actually reverse the banks that have been, put together. Because that's the wrong move. Look, we have spent 16 billion of taxpayers' money to close 9 universal banks, 347 microfinance institutions, 39 microcredit institutions, 15 savings and loans, 8 finance houses, 53 fund managers. You put it together, that's 473 financial institutions closed within 2 years in this country. Think about all the jobs, people who have lost their jobs. Think about people who cannot do business with these banks anymore. Look, there is a knock-on effect.
And as for the families
Think about the advertising agencies, the
here.
marketing, companies. Think about employees. Think about the people who borrow money from these banks who can no longer have access to this money.
But reversing it, how will reversing it solve the problem? Wouldn't it create another set of problems?
It wouldn't have, because they have wasted. Look, what was the capitalization? The investor capitalization was 400 million. Yeah, 400 million.
Yes.
Now, if you have given this banks the capitalization that they needed, you wouldn't need 16 billion. They used 16 billion to collapse these banks. That money could have recapitalized the banks 2 times over.
Okay, so what you would do, you say, is to reverse.
Yes, at least the 9 banks that have been closed.
You bring them back.
We can bring about 4, at least 4 of them back.
I see. And then that will solve the problem, and Ghanaians will have a good Christmas?
People will be able to get their jobs. People will be able to get the businesses that they do with the banks. We have wasted money. Now the finance minister is asking for another 15.6 billion for the same banking crisis. So we are now about 30 billion. So where is it going to end? The depositors still haven't gotten their money.
Okay.
So they are not going to have a good Christmas.
All right. I wish that we had some time. I think maybe we can have this conversation again another time.
Sure.
But just take a final word from you on how Ghanaians or how people can deal with their own, local, individual economies in these hard times and, get through the Christmas. What advice do you have as a finance person? Well,
times are obviously hard. So there's no money in the system. So you wouldn't want to spend on things that you don't actually need. I mean, Christmas is a time where we tend to buy things we don't need, because there are a lot of sales. People do sales. That is why they will more or less catch you out. So don't buy things you don't need. Save money, because the free education is not exactly free. So you need money to be able to educate your kids in terms of the books and things that they need.
So don't buy what you don't need.
But don't buy what you don't need.
Save money, and then what else?
and save.
Okay.
Save money. Save the little you have, and don't waste too much money, because things are no good, and they are probably not going to be. I don't want to be
a prophet of doom.
Okay. But things are not going to be good until probably the end of 2020, when we have elections and Ghanaians return the NDC government back to power.
We don't know that. We'll see how about that. But like I said, we can have this conversation again, how people can manage, especially those who do business with the cedi, with the dollar, how they can manage in these depreciation times. So thank you so much for coming, Mr. Rickett Hagen.